and I get this phone call from the adoption agency saying a little girl was born Saturday night, and her bio mom chose me to adopt her, and if I agreed, I could pick her up on Thursday. Apparently I yelled so loud, everybody came running from all over the house. We thought somebody had died or something. And all I could say was, I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be a mom. And I was like...
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Today, my friend Natalie Bauman joins me as our guest on the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Her life is a tapestry of unique experiences and incredible achievements. Natalie is not only an adoptee and an adoptive parent, but she's also a master storyteller and an award-winning video producer. Adopted at just 10 days old, Natalie always knew she was adopted. Her journey took an unexpected turn in her mid-20s when she met her biological family, uncovering secrets and connections that have shaped her understanding of family and identity. As a single adoptive mom of a now 17-year-old daughter, Natalie navigates the complexities of interracial adoption with grace and sensitivity. But Natalie's story doesn't stop there. Her passion for family history and genealogy led Natalie to a stunning discovery, which she will uncover in this episode. This revelation, combined with her professional expertise, has driven Natalie to help others preserve their family stories through her company, Digital Mosaic. Natalie has taught her daughter the importance of random acts of kindness. While I may pay for coffee for someone behind me in the line at Starbucks, Natalie is much more creative than that. They pay for the person behind them at a toll booth on the highway. Today, we'll dive deep into Natalie's incredible journey, the lessons she learned along the way, and her mission to help others tell their stories. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast with my longtime friend, Natalie Bauman. Natalie, hi. I'm going to jump right in.
Sure.
So as someone who has experienced adoption from both sides, as an adoptee, as an adoptive parent, what unique insights have you gained about the emotional dynamics involved in adoption?
Well, I think you'll agree with this one. Every single adoption situation is totally different. And you could have the exact same demographics of a family, of the extended family of the adopted child, and the experience of that family is going to be totally unique because everybody involved in the adoption triad, it impacts them so differently at different stages of life. Like you had mentioned, I've always known I was adopted. It was kind of part of our family conversation early on. I still have the books that my mom used to read to me, and my sister, who interestingly enough is not adopted and is born 3 years after I was, which I think is kind of a common story. People think they can't have a baby, they adopt, then voila. It works.
Voila.
So we always read this book, The Chosen Family, and that's been kind of a theme for my life because my mom especially was so magnificent at making me feel like it was just a part of who I was. Like I was tall, I had green eyes, I was adopted, but I was just as loved and sometimes maybe more loved than I would have been if I wasn't, because she wanted to make sure I knew how loved I was. So she was excellent at making me feel like I was special and they picked me special. And in truth, I think I picked them special too. I think it's kind of a two-way street. But, being an adoptive parent now, I take the lessons that I learned from watching how my mom handled those things, even though, I grew up in mostly this, late 60s, early 70s, and adoption was very much not a public discussion like it is today. It was, they would set you up with families where you looked like the family, so maybe you could fit in better. And it's more the idea of fitting in and pretending that you weren't adopted. And I remember being in a store at the Donna Lee store in Cleveland.
Yeah, I remember that.
Recognize that. And some lady says, "You look just like your mother." And I was quick to say, "Oh no, I'm not. I'm adopted." And I remember my mom going, "Okay." And it wasn't an insult, and I didn't mean any negative feeling towards her that I didn't look like her. It just wasn't the truth. And I've always been a truth seeker on that level. And I think it was annoying, obviously, to my parents.
I'm the same way. Yes.
And I wasn't embarrassed about it either. I think I was just kind of always comfortable with it. And I think I've tried to bring that same sensibility to my adoptive parent experience and be open and let my daughter kind of lead the way of what she's comfortable with. It's, it's a journey and you kind of figure it out as you go. You can prepare the best you can, but you can't walk into the journey and not be prepared for the unexpected.
Were there things also that you felt growing up as an adoptee? Like you talk about how you took lessons from how your parents did it and you felt like they did it very well for you. And I have to imagine that you felt certain things in your own journey as an adoptee who wasn't biologically related to your family. And did that play into, or how has that played into your parenting with your daughter?
Well, even observing how it played into my life in general, you always see the puzzle piece analogy, but it felt so true. There was always like a piece missing from the story. I had a letter that had been written by Jewish Family Service, whom I was adopted through, with some basic biographic information about my mother and a little bit about my father. So I knew a teeny bit about them, but like this feeling of, and honestly, I'm super close with my family. I'm not even gonna say adoptive family. There's my family and all my cousins, and we have a huge extended family and lots of love, lots of warmth. But there's always a little piece that wasn't there. And I know some adoptees don't feel that, and I don't know why you feel it or why you don't. I don't think it's from a lack of anything. I think it's more just an acknowledgement of the presence of your gestation period and that biological and emotional connection between the mother and the child before you're born. I think that's relevant, and we bring that with us into our life experience. And when I thought about adopting myself, I remember thinking it would be something that I would help that person navigate through, but understanding that I was coming in knowing that I wasn't everything. I wasn't going to be the child's be all end all. Maybe they'd be one of the kids who didn't want to search or wasn't feeling that same thing that I felt. I have friends who are adopted who never searched, never cared. But because I had experienced that, like a longing, a wanting to be whole in some way that it's inexplicable if you haven't experienced it.
Yeah,
it's just the reality.
And obviously that's what motivated you ultimately to seek out your biological parents. So what was that search like? When did you decide that that's what you wanted to do? And what was that experience like for you?
I guess I'd always thought that it would be nice to meet them, but I really, even in my teens, I never really thought seriously of anything practical about it. It wasn't like anything like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I'm able to do this. When I got out of college and was starting to live my adult life, I started thinking about it more and more. And I remember having conversations with different people in the family about it. And my mom and I sat and had multiple conversations. She's a very thorough lady. And she really talked me through, like, have you thought about the ramifications if they are not open to bringing you into the fold or to accepting or acknowledging you? Have you thought about what it would be like if they did? And really helped me kind of talk through all that stuff. And I remember it was like a multi-month process. And then one day we talked about it and she said, okay, you seem like you're ready, and you're prepared for whatever happens. And she handed me her phone number.
Oh, so she had
my
it.
mom had done that. She had been
she did. Okay.
Yeah.
She did
So
research.
I had found out that I could I was like, I think with my birth or my adoption papers were filed within 6 months of Ohio's window, where I could literally go down to the courthouse in Columbus and get my original birth certificate with my mother's name and my father's name if it was on there. And I was shocked to find that out because I hadn't known that information was right there. I think and that was I think it was filed like 63 or 64. And I think after that, you had to petition through the court. So it was a lot more paperwork, a lot more legwork to be able to do that. But for me, it was literally, I walked in there and I walked out with her name.
Wait, so that just happened. Those records just opened a few years, not so long ago, I think. So when was this?
This was in the 80s.
Oh, it was?
80,
I thought
I
thought adoptees weren't able to get their original birth certificates until like 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Well, no. So I don't know about the time frame from that point. That's in the mid 80s, late 80s is when I went and got it. But the records that were filed after I think 63 or 64 were locked. You had to wait. So I don't know how the law has changed since then, but mine were filed before then.
Okay. So and you're how old now?
62.
Okay.
So this
just to give context about
so I was born in 1962 and I'm 62 now, which is fun. And then I was adopted, as you said, at 10 days old. And, it was kind of like a last minute, oh my gosh, you're getting a kid in a couple of days. Like they didn't know about me before a few days. I think it could have been as fast as 2 days. I was born and then they found out about me and they brought me home like 2 days after they found out about me. So they didn't have a big window of time to prepare. And it was like this, my cousins always talk about, and my mom and my dad had talked about, like this great celebration. Everybody, like 15 cousins came pouring in, and all my aunts and uncles who lived nearby. And it was just like this crazy love fest. And so
doesn't that make you feel good?
Yeah,
to hear that. And I want to stop there for a second because I think that's an important piece right there. Obviously, people understand that there's trauma involved. There's a birth mom who just handed over a baby, and that's traumatic and that's really hard. And on the other side, you have the adoptive parents who are celebrating. And I always say to people, even through the journey, this child deserves to know they were celebrated throughout their entire journey to life. And there's this other side, but we cannot forget about the joy that this child deserves to know, look, we celebrated you.
Yeah.
So there's so much hate online, right? To say, how dare you? This is disgusting to celebrate this blah, 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 this adoption. And I get it. I get where they're coming from. Mm. And look at you. You have this story of this love fest around you, and you know what the other side of that is. And you need that as a child to know how excited your family was to welcome you into the world. Am I right? Did you?
And I was also, like, when I adopted my daughter, I was also super cognizant of the heartache on the other side of it. And now that I've learned more about my own birth journey and adoption, I know the heartache. It'll get me choked up thinking about it.
Okay.
I know the heartache on the other side too that my mom went through, my biological mom, when I was born. And I've learned more about some of the family dynamics and some of the experiences there. And it is heartbreaking to know that. But at the same time, adoption is not the evil entity. It is a pathway to a different future for a child.
Mm.
Even though we're born into a physical family, there are many, many valid reasons why the child is not able to be raised by that family. And it is a horrible sadness, and it's a huge tragedy. And it's also a salvation. I don't like to use that word actually, because I'm not a savior of my child. And that always drives me crazy how people say, oh, you're so great for adopting. I'm like, no, I'm just a mom. I'm not like anything special. I'm just like you are. I just got my child in a different way. The same as my mom was not my savior. She's just my mom. But it is, especially having the breadth of life experience I've had and the experience and knowledge about my bio family and my adoptive family, and then what I know of my daughter's adoptive or bio family as well. It's a sadness taking a child away from the person who raised them. And, we know so much about how the child carries so much of the mother physically with them through life. Like when a woman is born, the mother actually is carrying her grandchildren's DNA in her at the time. So disconnecting from that beautiful physical connection is a spiritual matter as well. So yeah, I agree. It's painful, but you have to celebrate the beauty, because how can you not? I mean,
there's always an and, right? This and in adoption.
Yes, exactly. It's a great way to put it.
Thank you. I just needed to talk about that, because I think it's such an important piece. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. A lot of people talk about the adoptee being the center, and that starts in utero. And we can't forget about that. We can't forget about anyone in that triad. So here you are, you're seeking out your biological parents. Did you find them? What was that like?
I did. So it's so easy to get caught up in different parts of the story.
No, it's okay.
My mom handed me her phone number, and I was blown away. I've told her so many times what a special, unselfish thing that was for her to do, because a lot of parents feel very proprietary over their children, and
territorial.
letting the other people in or opening up that door is one thing. And my mom wrote me this letter, and I've shared it in a couple different ways. And the gist of it is that you can love many people in many different ways, and loving one person does not take away your love from another. And she was acknowledging my need for this person, or to reach out to this person and having a connection. But also she understood that did not and could not diminish my love for her and my family that I had been raised by. And I just thought that was such a beautiful, unselfish parenting act, period.
No, I'm getting a tissue out right now.
It was one of the most, my mom passed recently. And so we had long talks over the last couple of visits, and I had shared with her how special that was to me, and just how it spoke volumes to me about her understanding, even though she didn't have all the support we have today as adoptive parents, or even anywhere in the triad. It's like, it was such a quiet, closed, private experience. There were really not a lot of books. You didn't talk about it with people. There wasn't a lot of community support. So for her to come to that understanding on her own, and having the grace to acknowledge that she saw my need and was okay with it, was really special. Yeah. So I didn't do anything about it for a while. And then I called her, and she was shocked to hear from me. I said, here's my name, here's when I was born. I just wanted to say, I'm not expecting anything from you. And at first I said, I just want to make sure I'm talking to the right person. She goes, you are. And my heart just kind of lurched, right? And then she got all choked up and said, can I call you back tomorrow? And I said, sure. And turns out she had never told her husband about me. So this had been such a painful, difficult thing for her. She had compartmentalized it and not shared it with the people, 24 years later, for 24 years, she had kept that as a secret. Her parents obviously knew, and one of her siblings, I've later found out. But so she had to tell her husband, and it was an incredibly traumatic situation for her. So here I am, really with low expectations. And I said, I've always wanted to tell you thank you. I don't want anything from you. I would love to, be able to talk to you and get to hear more about your experiences and who you are and all that type of stuff. And obviously the medical piece. But I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know that I'm okay and that I'm happy and I've had a wonderful life. My family's fantastic and they love me very much. And, I just wanted her to know that, So our relationship has really been limited mostly to emails about medical stuff. And I did meet her once and we went to lunch and it was very weird. I saw like a shorter version of me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we're very similar in a lot of ways. And like she didn't want to see any baby pictures. Again, just I think for her, the only way she could cope with it is kind of compartmentalize it. And she was warm and lovely and told me, I don't even remember a lot of the details of what she told me because it was so overwhelming being there with her. And I brought like my photo album of baby pictures that just stayed in the car. And that's kind of symbolic of what our relationship has been since then. And we've emailed a few times over the years. But she had asked me, she goes, have you spoken to your biological father? And honestly, I said, I really hadn't thought about him very much. In my whole journey, it was always about my mother. Isn't that funny? I mean,
there's a father in this?
Right. They're like equal participants in the making of said child. But yeah, It wasn't I don't know, it wasn't something I thought about. So after that, I did reach out to him and she lives farther away. He lives within driving distance. So he was like super excited to meet me. And he had told me that he tried to find me at some point. And I went and met him. Actually, I wrote an essay about it. That was my first published essay. I guess I was like 26 at the time. And it was like the Sunday supplement cover story of the Mother's Day newspaper down in Columbus. And they commissioned a piece of artwork for it and everything. And it was about the experience of finding and meeting him and his family. And he's got 4 kids and 2 stepkids. And like I pulled up to his house and they all came pouring out. And
oh my God.
It was overwhelming, frankly. Yeah. It was like too much. And I'm in touch with, I have 2 half brothers and 2 half sisters, and I'm in touch with them, via social. And we all met in person then, and I haven't seen them in person since, but it was really a lot. It was a lot, but he was a photographer. I'm very much into digital media, photography, video. And she also is very artistic in her way too, and a writer. And we share a lot of sensibilities and skills and kind of basic emotional components. So it's really nice to see that. But I remember seeing him in person and going, I don't really see the connection.
Okay.
But I got to meet my grandfather, and both of them passed away within a year of me meeting them. So I was very grateful that I'd had a chance to meet them. And actually my adoptive father went with me the second time to go see them because my biological father got diagnosed with cancer fairly soon after I met him. And so my adoptive father and I went to visit the family and spent time with them. So I was glad they got to meet, and that was kind of cool, sharing that with my dad.
Now, I know that you had this very unique revelation during, this time in your life where you learned about your biological family. So can you reveal that to us?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I'm really into DNA and genealogy and exploring family history, which is a great irony not lost on me. So of my adoptive family, I kind of keep the big family tree and do all the research. And when DNA tests were coming out, I talked to my adoptive mom and sister into doing their DNA because my dad had passed and my sister was the branch to that part of the family. And I wanted to get my mom's history, and I'd done mine as well. So I remember I was actually sitting exactly where I am right now. It was one of those DNA genealogy rabbit holes you get into. And it was like 2 a.m. and the DNA test had come in and I'm looking at my mom's list of all her DNA connections. And there I was.
What?
I am my adopted mom's 5th to 8th cousin. I started crying. It was like, are you kidding me? It was the craziest thing. And some people will say, you know, our family's Jewish. I'm half Jewish.
So you really do look like her.
I don't know if I actually do. So I'm genetically like maybe 60% Jewish. And my mom and my sister are 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, which is Jewish origin through Europe. And so some people say that there's like a few degrees of separations between many Jewish people. But I'm like, there's a whole lot of Jewish people I am not biologically connected to. So over the next couple of years, I was able to, I think I know where the connection is. I think I know about like 6 generations back, which sister married which brother on the branches of the family that connected, where we shared based on how much DNA we shared. And it was so cool to find that. I'm still verifying. It's not a done deal that I know exactly when and where that connection came, but I have a pretty good idea. And that was, I can't even describe the emotions too. And I try not to stress it too much because I'm not, as far as I know, my daughter and I don't share any DNA, and it doesn't change anything.
Right.
It doesn't change my love for her or how she and I fit together or why we're family. And so on that same side of that story, it doesn't change anything that I'm biologically connected to my family, but it feels really amazing. It's very cool to know that there is a deeper connection beyond just emotional ties.
That is really cool.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. And one day I'm going to pull together all these kismet moments and stories that come out of adoption journeys, things that happen that were meant to happen, and just wild connections like this. I love it. Love it.
It's really special. Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about your daughter and the adoption of your daughter. Just give us a broad overview of that process. And did you always know you wanted to adopt too? Like, do you think your adoption had anything to do with that? Or
I always knew I'd be a good adoptive mom because I understood the feelings from both sides of it. Mm-hmm. I always figured I'd have a family. It wasn't like a driving need. Like I'm not fulfilled unless I'm a parent, but so my dad lived in Cleveland. I was living in Cincinnati at the time, and he passed away in 2002. And within a year, I decided to move back to Cleveland where I'd grown up and wanted to live around family. And once I was here, and I kind of, my career trajectory had changed a bit. So I was going to, right before the day he died, I was literally moving to Boston to work on a national television show. And I was going to take my career to more of a national basis since I was 40-ish, and I hadn't gotten married. Well, I'd been married and divorced, hadn't gotten remarried, didn't have a kid in my life. And I'm like, maybe I'll kind of pursue that and let's see what happens. Honestly, my first thought, and I don't know if you ever had this thought as well, was like, I'm single, I'm Jewish, which is not a common thing. Like, why would somebody pick me to adopt their child? So
that's funny because my consultant said, you're single, you're Jewish, you're in your 40s. It's going to take some time. And 3 months later, I was chosen.
Right. And it was one of those things where I was like, well, I'm going to take it out of my hands. I'm going to do the home study. You and I share a friend who had adopted internationally and had 2 older children who he became a parent to. So I had a little bit of a mentor who had been in it ahead of me. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who wanted to be a parent, who was a single mom, or who was a single woman, and decided to go the artificial insemination route and biologically have a child. So I had people around me who were kind of in the same mindset, like, okay, I want to start a family. And I had a bunch of friends who had moved away from Cleveland and all had moved back. And so I had this really nice network of people, and I built my social network up when I came back here, and I was enjoying my life. And I said, you know what, I'm going to apply for adoption. I decided very deliberately to adopt domestically because I'd had an easy time finding my family when I was ready to, I wanted to know that my child would also be able to pick up a phone, hop in the car, and go meet their family if they wanted to.
Oh,
So,
that's a that's a cool little intention that I would have never thought in that way. So I love that you.
yeah. And I also didn't want to go spend 6 months in China waiting for a child and maybe not get the child and do that by myself. To me, that
Mm-hmm.
seemed really harder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied. I went through a local adoption company, had my home study done, and I kind of threw my fate to the wind and said, if I'm meant to be a parent, I'll be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd had a couple of close calls where somebody, they like the way the adoption agency I worked with did it. You did like an 8-page, 10-page biography with pictures and describing what kind of life you'd have and what you wanted to give to that child and kind of the lifestyle and perspective. And so that was out there. And then you're just kind of living your life. And I'd gotten a call or two that's they'd given my profile to somebody because the agency didn't have like a huge group of prospective parents, nor did they have a huge group of children that needed a home.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I was thinking it would be a fairly fast part of the process where they would match you. So like a couple options came and went, and I said, well, we'll see what happens. And then
was this private or
it
foster?
was through Belfair.
Okay, so it's private adoption, not through the foster care system.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, went on with my life, finished a big work project. I was a freelance video producer and writer at the time. So I had worked at home, traveled a lot. And then I had gone down to South Carolina. My stepfather had retired. They were moving from California to South Carolina to be near my sister and the kids. And so I went down for the weekend, helped them unpack. And I'm playing cards with my niece on Monday morning. And she's 7 or 8. And I get this phone call from the adoption agency saying a little girl was born Saturday night and her bio mom chose me to adopt her. And if I agreed, I could pick her up on Thursday. So I'm in South Carolina. I have a room full of junk upstairs where baby room would be. I hadn't bought anything because I really was not anticipating this. And apparently I yelled so loud, everybody came running from all over the house. They thought somebody had died or something. And all I could say was, I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be a mom. And I was I have the notes that I took that day, like how much she weighed, what hospital she'd been born at, a little bit about her background and ethnicity. And I was like overwhelmed. And I remember I said, I have to call you back and I need to just take a moment. And so I thought about it. I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm either going to say yes to this child or I'm not going to adopt. This is my moment. Am I up for it? And I had this very conscious moment of, okay, I'm in. Let's do this. And so I called back and it was just insanity from then on. So that was Monday. My sister and I spent like half of the day Tuesday at Target filling up my car with stuff. My mom drove up and stayed with my sister's kids. My sister and I drove home. Went Tuesday. I got to meet my daughter for the first time. She was staying in Chagrin Falls at a home that took care of babies for transitionary periods. And I got to meet her biological mom that same day at the adoption agency. And it was so emotional just to meet her. You could tell this was intense. I don't claim to know how she was feeling because she didn't really share too much about it, but it was intense on both sides and very much aware of what a monumental moment it was. And it was just overwhelming. And I remember went and putting the car seat in the car, and my cousins kind of went into full Cleveland mode and started borrowing this and getting that. And, I sent out an email to all my friends and just saying, hey, I'm a mom on Thursday. And everybody jokes about that email later because it was impossible to call all the people that were important to me to let them know. And I didn't have 9 months to unveil it or get used to it or prepare the house or even get insurance or pick out a name. So my nephew, who I'm very close with, and I went to the store and we were looking through baby books, he's like, how about this name? I'm like, no, that's not quite right. I wanted to name the child after my dad, who had passed away 3 years ago at that point, 4 years ago. And so he actually picked out her name, which I ended up going back to later. And I was like, no, that's not quite right. And, it was like a few days of all that kind of stuff happening so quickly. So I remember holding her in my arms for the first time. She was sleeping the whole time, just looking at this child going, I'm going to be your mother tomorrow. This is insane. It just seems so crazy and it happened so fast. So Thursday came and my sister went with me and was by my side throughout all of it. And since she's the mom of 3 children and my little sister, it was really nice to share that experience with her. And we brought my daughter home.
That's so beautiful.
It was
17 years later.
And now I'm ready to go to college and move out.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. So, Natalie, you're a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance the need to tell this beautiful, compelling story with the ethical considerations of privacy and consent, especially when dealing with personal and potentially sensitive content? Because if you're anything like me, I want to shout from the rooftops everything about my story. And at a certain point, I'm like, oh, I can't, what can I share? What shouldn't I share?
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
It's, and if you notice, I haven't used her name. I haven't done, given any identifying information about her, because that's her story. Mm-hmm. And I think my understanding of it now is much more acute and protective of her owning how she wants to talk about her life, mm-hmm. who she is. And that includes her biological family and her background and anything that goes on in her life, and again, I think this is a parenting issue for non-adoptive parents as well as adoptive parents.
Yeah, I agree.
Do not share your child's life on Facebook. It's not your story to share. And then once it's out there, you cannot reel that stuff back. I think I was instinctively not totally out there like some people had been. Even now, I wish I'd been even less public about things, just because at the time it feels like your story. I'm adopting. It's like my child, my family, and you want to share. And then comes the day when, your child is old enough to say, why did you do that? I don't want people to know that about me. And I'm grateful that, the people who I did share details with were in a real trusted circle. And I trust that they're never going to walk up to her and say, oh, I know that and that. But people forget stuff with age, and like later, you never know what people might blurt out thinking it's just common knowledge or it's no big deal that they know about it. And I just think you put yourself and your child in a very vulnerable place. The more people who know your details and your child's details, the more you put them in a place of discomfort. And again, it's an ethical issue of privacy. Where does the parent's right to tell their story stop and the child's right to own their story begin? And again, it's not just an adoptive parent story. It's a parent story to think about, when your child, and then this is kind of my rubric for how I judge a lot of things in my parenting journey. When she's 18 and adult, will she look back and hate me for having done this, said that, shared this? What is her story to own later? And if I let something out of the bag when she's younger, it's too late. People know certain things. And there's things that I think also can define you if you discuss them. So there's, I think, pieces of my experience I haven't really even talked to with her because it was my experience of the situation, and it's not necessarily truth. It's just my perception. And so I don't want to share things with her that will make her feel some sort of way about it that might affect how she sees herself, the world. I think we all protect our kids in some ways that way, but I think, we owe them whatever they want to know about. Any truth that exists about her that she wants to know is hers to know. It's not the world's to know. So anything like I'm going to be doing some writing, some essays about some of the experience that we've talked about in greater depth. And it's a very meaningful part of my life that I want to share. And I'm very aware that it's my story is my story. It's not my mother's story. Also, I want to be protective of as well. And this is kind of ironic because my adoptive mom, I know there's people in my biological family who don't know about me. And my adoptive mom always said that it's my life. I should feel free to contact them and reach out, even if that's not something that my biological mom was comfortable with. I said, I never want to be the one who comes in and blows up her life. That is not okay with me. So it kind of goes, there's both sides of it. I want to be protective of my daughter's story and give her the dignity and the responsibility to decide how she wants to share that. But also in writing about and discussing with friends and thinking about my biological family, like where's my line that I'm comfortable with. So, and then here comes in another tricky little piece of this is DNA. DNA changes everything. Many people in the 50s, 60s, 70s even who gave away children for adoption didn't tell people. It was a secret, and that was their right. And legally, it was their right. DNA unleashes all of that because all of a sudden, like my sister and I found that my father had a half sister we didn't know about. And she is a delight. She is a fantastic addition to our life, but that's who we are. We're cool with it. Not a big deal at all. My father would have been thrilled to have a sister. Some of my biological siblings don't know I exist. And does that make me sad? Oh yeah, of course. But I also recognize that it's a secret that my mom kept for many, many years. And to have the secret revealed would also reveal that there is 60 years of her not sharing that with people in her life. And that I cannot be the person to blow that up for her. I can't.
It's so complicated. There's so much there. And I tell people there's no such thing as closed adoption anymore, period, the end, not in the world that we live in.
No.
Totally. Yeah. On so many different levels. And, on the one hand, we need to respect our children and their story and all of that. On the other hand, sometimes we have a real need to talk about it so that we can get advice or how to deal with things. And I always think that within the adoption community, if you're sharing with other adoptive parents, I tend to think that they get it and they get the sacredness of it more than most other people. And if you find yourself in a safe adoptive family community, that could be a really good place to share those things, to seek advice, especially when it's not your really close circle of family and friends. I think our parents, as much as we trust our parents and love our parents, they may be, because as we all want to share and shout from the rooftops, people tend to share more information that they should. So should we be sharing this intimate stuff with our parents? The last thing we want is for our children to hear something about them that they have yet to learn.
That's the big crisis moment. You never want that to happen because, then they feel you're not a trusted partner with them in this life, that you are part of the problem instead of you are their support and their love and their backup. That's the big fear. Who knows what? It can be weaponized too, and it can be used against the child, or people talking about them when they're not there. I mean, nothing could be worse than your child hearing something, or frankly, that could end a friendship really quick if you hear friends talking about your child in a way that is less than what you would want.
Yeah.
And, again, it's very personal information about the children's identity. So friends talk about, I know, you've got similar friendships to what I have, where, you sit and talk about parenting stuff, and you talk about your kids in general, and not necessarily connected to adoption or about their life or their history or their bio families. But I think we all have to be a little careful about what we say about our kids, and and about the people that we have in our circle of trusted. But at the same time, as a human being, as a parent, especially as a single parent, you need a circle of people that are your trusted people, who will love your kid because of all the things that are shared about them and because of the issues that they bring to the world. And it doesn't make you love them less.
Yeah.
But you have to just pray that the people you trust are trustworthy.
Yeah.
Again,
absolutely.
Parents don't always have that discretionary off button. Like, I shouldn't be telling the whole world about this.
I know, we're all human. We need to share, right? And so, Natalie, like me, you're a single mom. You're a mom through transracial adoption. You are white. Your child is Black. From your experience, what are some of the most misunderstood aspects of transracial adoption, and how have you addressed these challenges with your family and your community?
Sure. That's a huge question. I think I'll start by sharing when I adopted my daughter. I don't know that I hadn't taken any classes in transracial adoption. I had grown up in a part of Cleveland that was fairly white. And I initially had said, I listed when you do the questionnaire for adoption, when I did it, you had to list whatever backgrounds where you were comfortable with. And I was like, whatever kid is meant to be my kid will find their way to me, and we'll figure it out. So I didn't really have any of the prep or any of the thinking about that. I already lived in a very diverse neighborhood. Just because I chose that for me, that was where I wanted to live. And I had a pretty diverse group of friends. I would say a lot of my friends were friends from many years ago, so kind of fed more from my more homogenous background. So I had friends of different nationalities, some friends of color, just that I especially people that I'd met since I've moved back to Cleveland, and kind of my newer group of friends. So I had a wider circle. Our mutual friend had adopted some children from South America. But that's not the same as adopting a child of African American heritage. And there's a responsibility that you take on when you adopt a child of a different race, to immerse yourself as much as you can in, how they're going to walk in the world. So for us, a big part of that was her hair, making sure that her hair always looked nice, and learning how to do her hair, because she had probably it was a big learning curve for me, just because my hair, if I get up in the morning and I brush it, I'm lucky and it looks fine. It doesn't take, I'm not a high maintenance person in any way, shape, or form. So it was just having to be high maintenance about the care of her hair and to learn about it. So, consulted with different friends. I read like all these books and got all the right hair products. And one of my girlfriends, whose hair is very similar to my daughter's, bought us this great set of hair care products as she got a little bit older. But like our challenge, it was a weird combination of things. So my daughter has sensory issues. She's on the spectrum of autism, and her getting her hair combed is, when it's fine now, and it's kind of a beautiful evolution. But when she was young, for the first 10, 12 years of her life, it was an extremely traumatic experience for her to have her hair combed, washed, conditioned, and all the things that as say Black beauty is not easy, but it's very important. And it was a whole learning curve for me to find the right people to help us along that way. And I got to be really good at doing her hair. And now she doesn't want me to do it. She has a hairdresser and she loves going to the salon and having that experience. And she's very proud of how she looks. And we kind of laugh about it now. But I mean, literally, she'd be sitting in her high chair and it was, I can't even describe for those of your listeners who have not had this experience, it can be an entire Saturday. It's a very normal routine in a Black family for there to be a hair day because you have to detangle. You've got to take that old hairstyle out. You've got to do numerous things. And she would spend her whole time fighting me like that. So I would put her in her high chair. I'd do her hair for a little while. I'd go into the other room, cry for a little bit, go back in with a smile on my face, try to distract her. But the funny thing was, I mean, it's not really funny. It was kind of symbolic of the difficulty of transracial adoption with that one aspect of it, is that we would be out in public. And I can't tell you, after all these hours of having this very traumatic experience for both of us and walking out of the house with a hairstyle, Black women would come up to us with the best of intentions. Well, I'm going to say with the best of intentions. I'm sure some people would look at us and be like, yeah, that's not okay. And respect, that's fine. People are allowed to have their opinions. So I kind of went into it with a state of grace of anybody who was approaching us was doing it out of care for this child because they wanted to make sure that the woman that she was with, this white woman, knew what she was doing or could care for her hair appropriately because they're very concerned about making sure that this child is taken care of. And so again, respect for that. And I wanted to always think about how my daughter was perceiving this, right? And so they would hand me cards. Oh, here, have you tried this? You know, here's a great hairstylist. Here's this. And my child with sensory issues was not going to go sit in a salon and have a stranger detangle her hair. It was going to be whatever I could provide to her myself. But it got to the point where if she saw a Black woman approaching us, she would hide behind me. And that just broke my heart. And I didn't know how to change that dynamic because she was too young to understand or be explained to. And I couldn't shield her from it. The only thing I could do is get better and better and better at doing her hair so that anybody seeing her would just go, oh, she's beautiful. And just leave it at that and not feel like they had to approach. And there was no good way to handle it. Even in retrospect, I don't know that there was anything I could have done differently. I got better as fast as I could, and I tried everything. And, you know, it was a hard part of the journey for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear that story a lot, time and time again. So, I mean, it is, that happens. And on the one hand, you know, besides the fact that she had sensory issues, having a hair day, what a beautiful way to bond and like let go of the rest of the world. It forces you to just stay present with your child. I mean, the fact that she had sensory issues is a whole nother dynamic of it. How long do you think it took you to learn? And were you ever like, when anyone approached you, were you ever welcoming of that? Like,
I was kind. I'm always kind. I mean,
yeah, but I mean, like,
like,
please teach me. I'm happy to have it. Or were you like, I get it, well, and you don't understand?
We reached a point where, again, even at that point, her story was none of their business. I'm not going to sit there and tell a stranger. Right. Her hair would look nicer if she didn't have autism and it wasn't torture for her to get her hair done. There was nobody's business. I'm not going to, especially in front of her, I'm not going to out her, you know, very personal life struggles and our personal family struggles to perfect strangers. So that I had to just suck it up and look like a bad mom and know in my heart that I was not, and that I was doing absolutely everything possible to help my daughter have a positive experience about her hair, because her hair is gorgeous. I love it. And I would pay her a lot of money to let me have a hair day with her now and just do her hair for her. But she loves her stylist, and good for her, and that she should have that. And yeah, it was a really weird combination of appreciation for the love, if that's what they were coming to it with, instead of judgment, and also a huge frustration of just kind of sucking it up and looking like I don't know what I'm doing. And the problem with that is that as a white parent of a Black child, you have to care so much more than if I had a child whose hair looked like mine and I would just complain about having knots in it. Oh boy, what a great problem to have, you know? So I put more time and energy into the care and love of her hair than it ever appeared. And that was a little hard to take, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. She knew that I was doing what I could for her. And I think she understands more now. Like we joke about it now, kind of wryly, and say, okay, well, you know, that was part of it. But I always made sure like that whatever school she belonged to, she was not the only child of color there. I think the hardest thing was in our religion, there aren't a ton of families with children of color. There's a lot more now but there's not like one congregation you could say, I
Yeah.
want to be with like there's 10 other kids that look like her. So she would walk into our religious organization building and she might be one of the few people of color and she hated it. And she went through the whole, process of going to religious school and became bat mitzvah and she's very proud of being Jewish, but she's also keenly aware of being one of the few Black Jews here in Cleveland. And I hope as she gets older, there's like a national organization called the Jews of Color Initiative that we're members of. She doesn't want to participate in it, and that's fine. I do it because our family is a multiracial family, even if I personally am not. Well, I guess I technically am too, from my DNA, but from my lived experience, I am pretty homogenous, appearing at least. And so I try to have the information available. And we have lots of books in the house about transracial families and about Black Jews, and excited to go to places in other cities where they have larger groups of people in which she might find people who also have had the same lived experience of being in a religion where you're kind of an uncommon face.
Yeah, it is hard in the Jewish community, and hopefully it is changing. I see it changing slowly but surely. When we lived in Chicago, it was very different. Like in my son's religious school class, he was one of like 9 other kids who were joined in their family through adoption and all transracial, and it was beautiful. And then we moved to Cleveland and it was very different looking. There are a couple, luckily, in his friendship circle that make it much easier. But so we talked about how you're a storyteller, and how has your personal journey through adoption influenced your professional work? And tell us a little bit about what you do professionally.
Sure. I've been a professional storyteller, video producer my whole career. A little bit after my daughter was born, I realized I could no longer fly all over the country to shoot videos. I can't go to Morocco to do the Gift of Sight program for lens crafters again. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to reconfigure things? And I started doing a lot more script writing, a lot of local production, working with like big local organizations, and trying to figure out like what that's going to look like to be also home with my child as much as possible. So I'm in love with StoryCorps. It's a nonprofit organization that helps individuals tell their story, but they're preserved on audio in the National Archives. And I started thinking, well, there's a lot more stories that need to be told that people don't want to share nationally, why are not they showing the videos of the interviews? Because videos are, all the expressions and the things that are really uniquely personal to a person, you can't always hear in their voice. But when you see a conversation, it's so much more meaningful. So I ended up developing an app that was called Simply Told that would allow people to record their stories on video in little bits and pieces. And then I worked with libraries, museums. We did a documentary with some local Holocaust survivors, and just really would sit down one-on-one like this with people and record their stories. And I just find the process of sitting across from somebody and giving them your full attention and telling them to just share their stories with you and be an active listener and really caring about what they're saying. To me, it's a really special experience. People trust you because they can tell you care, and they open up and sometimes share things that they haven't even shared with their own families. But you're in a moment of preserving that for the future generations. And recently, one of the people who I had interviewed and really became close friends with over at the Solon Senior Center, we had probably 10 different sessions of like an hour or two and really got to know him well. And he passed away, I guess, about a year ago. And I was able to make sure his wife had all the stories that he had shared about his family, about his history, his time in Vietnam. And it was so meaningful to me that I was allowing them to preserve a piece of their history. So even with my parents, I've sat down with both of them. My stepdad is still here. My mom just passed away, and my dad died 20 years ago. And that was right before I started doing all this. So I at least have my mom and my stepdad's stories told in their own voice. So that's kind of my passion, is making sure people have somebody to sit across from and sit and tell their stories too. And, maybe my daughter will tell her story about her adoption one day, or about our life together, and for good or bad. I'm sure she's going to have lots of opinions about what I could have done better, as most children do. But yeah, that's kind of my professional world. And I do, business videos and market product videos, all sorts of different stuff. But I'd like to start doing more writing, more personal, creative writing. So it's kind of the next step of the journey after this, and adoption, and my adoption stories and perceptions will definitely be part of that creation process.
Well, there's a ton of stories out there, and what a beautiful way to preserve your story, especially if you start, I always tell our families, in fact, we give a journal when they start the process, to write down the story as you go, because it's a beautiful one. And even if it doesn't always feel like that when you're in it afterwards, what a beautiful way to share it with your child. Do you have any advice you would give to parents, to prospective adoptive parents, especially if they're considering transracial adoption?
Think about the people in your family. Think about if there are people who have prejudices, or who are the mouthy ones who are going to say whatever they feel like they need to say. And imagine that child being in front of them. And every Thanksgiving and every birthday, are you okay with your family being around a child and hearing it? Just think about what they say when there's nobody of color around, and think if you're okay with your kid overhearing that, and make sure that your family, your extended family, is going to be part of your life. And if they are, you're going to need to make some decisions, whether that child can be around people who are not going to be kind and not supportive 100%, because to be a Black person in our community, if you're going to have a person in your family that you're bringing in to a non-African-American family, or not a family of color, you have to know that that kid is going to feel 100% loved, not just by you, but by everybody you're bringing into their life. And also just be super open to thinking about why you don't have people of color in your life if you don't. And if you can't bring a child into the world without seeing it through their eyes. The funny thing is, my daughter has said to me time and time again, why, like if I have a group of friends over, people that I went to high school with, she'll say, well, why aren't any of them Black? And I've explained to her, I'm like, well, when I grew up, it was fairly segregated, as much as it was like beyond my control at that point. The only thing I can control are the people I've chosen to bring into my life after. So maybe certain groups of friends of mine are going to be all white, but our neighborhood's never going to be. The schools I've sent you to are never going to be. And we have to be okay to talk about that. So, you have to be willing to be honest with yourself first, but recognize you're responsible to that 18-year-old version of that baby.
Yeah.
They're going to hold you to task. Becca, you'll tell them the same story.
I love this advice, is really great. And I sat down with my parents before I adopted, and we went through all of the criteria, and we had a conversation about race, and I'm so glad that we did. I want to wrap up. Thank you so much this was so great. So much insight and so many little golden nuggets, I like to say. I have a couple rapid fire questions I want to end with. Who is a person or an organization that has had an impact on your adoption journey, no matter where in your adoption journey?
Sure. Well, I think every adoptive parent needs to have a parent mentor, a friend, or someone who's a little bit farther ahead along the journey than you, that can guide you. So I I think I mentioned earlier, we have a mutual friend who has now 2 adult children that he adopted from South America. And I've called him a bazillion times. And he and my daughter are super close, which has been really lovely.
Oh.
And his experiences are not always the same as mine. His kids' experiences and issues are different than my daughter's, but he is a sounding board for me. So I would say make sure you have somebody who is on the same journey, but at different stages. So I remember, Becca, when you were considering adoption, I remember a conversation you and I had, and you were just trying to learn more at the time. So again, it's good to have people at various stages, maybe somebody that you can be a mentor to, and have somebody that is willing to show you the ugly face of the hard part about whether it's single parenting or transracial adoption or whatever the case is in your parenting journey. Have people that are walking the walk with you, because it can be lonely otherwise.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need a sounding board to say, am I doing this as well as I could be? And please give me some tough love. I need someone who is open enough and willing enough to step back and give me that observation that I can't see for myself, because our kids deserve it. Our kids deserve us to be self-critical. Our kids deserve us to question the way things are being done at a certain time, the way that society approaches adoption. If we don't feel like that is the best thing for our kid, to give our kid that space and resources that work for them, and not to just go along the party line of what the common way of talking about adoption is. It's okay to kind of have a different path, but it's good to rely on yourself, but also have other people who will help you hold a mirror up to yourself and how you're parenting and what you're providing your kid.
Awesome. What's a book or a podcast you're either reading or listening to right now that you love? Doesn't have to do with adoption.
Well, my daughter will tell you, I am addicted to the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, and I probably gifted the books. I think they're up to number 9 or number 10 now. I've gifted the books multiple times, and actually my computer is perched upon 4 of them. So they're very
I love it.
books.
I love it.
Time travel and science fiction, so it's good.
Describe adoption in 3 words.
That's a really hard question. Optimism in a baby.
Thank you so much, Natalie Bauman. And if you are listening to this podcast, as Natalie said, sometimes it's more fun to watch it in person, and you can go to YouTube and watch this interview there too. I hope that you got some or a lot of golden nuggets in this episode. We drop a new episode every Wednesday and Fridays. So leave us a review. Let us know what you thought, and tune in next time to the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.